So welcome back, everyone. I am really thrilled to welcome you to the second segment of our virtual event. We are now going to dive into the topic of how digital natives, so to speak, how organizations that have been on the journey of transforming their workplace or even have been supporting their clients with digital transformation, what they have learned and what we can do to accelerate our transformation journey. So I would like to welcome our my colleague and the head of human capital research, Amy Abel, who will be moderating this panel. Amy, take it away.
Sure. Can you hear me, Stella?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stella, and thank you to all of you for attending this session. We're pretty excited about this session. Wait till you hear the esteemed panelists that I have joining me today. And it's also a very, of course, timely conversation of what's going on. The title of this session, Accelerating the Digital Transformation for Your Workforce, is the title. And just to set the stage a little bit, it's around, some of us have been working remotely for a long time, and some of us have been thrown into this, right? Many organizations are probably still struggling with what to do, how to do, the technology, all of these things. And it's obviously beyond the technology and the infrastructure. What does it mean for our workforce, and how can people connect? How can people collaborate? And how can we continue to support our workforce in this digital world that we now live in? So that's the premise of this session, and that we will be listening and hearing from the veterans of this. They've been doing this, and their companies have been doing this for a long time. What can we, perhaps not as veteran, what can we learn from them, right? And obviously we're going to touch lightly on COVID-19 because it's the world in which we are at today, but I like to sort of pivot that conversation into sort of beyond COVID-19, because this is not a COVID-19 conversation. This is a digital conversation. This is about the technology. This is about how we learn to work remotely. How do we work from home, or with our dogs and pets and animals and children, all of those things, right? What does this mean for our workforce? And so I will first pause to really quickly ask my panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to, in the order, I'm going to first come to Rajamma, who is the Director of Information Technology, HR Digital Transformation Leader. I'm just going to read you their titles because you can appreciate the level of great work and responsibilities that these individuals have. We also have Greg, who's a Senior Vice President of People and Performance Evangelist. Right, great titles. And finally, Sergio, Head of Data and Innovation, and also Instructor of Intelligent Automation. So I'm going to first ask them to introduce themselves, tell us just a little bit more about the organization and their role, as well as hopefully a little bit of a fun question, which is, what was one positive thing you've discovered as a result of moving to work remotely? So how about, let me start with Greg, if you don't mind. Can you give us a little bit more of introduction and then tell us about that question of what one positive thing you've discovered?
Yeah, Amy, thanks so much, and thanks for having me join the panel today. I really appreciate it. As you mentioned, I am part of the People and Purpose team for Workday, and I've been in that role as part of our leadership team for about the last 6 years. Workday is a digital native where we just celebrated our 15th birthday. So as you said, we were sort of born of a digital age and have leveraged that infrastructure, which I'm happy to talk a little bit about as we move forward. And of course, I hope that everyone's family, friends, and you all are well right now. To your point on the positive, I would say one of the things that's really actually, I would almost call it a stupiphany. It was completely obvious and yet maybe a bit of a surprise. But ironically, in this very digital, remote experience that we're having, what I find at least is that social connections and social agility is really come to the top of the list that our workmates are focused on, that they appreciate and want to stay absolutely connected with. So there's a bit of irony as we continue to embrace digital as a way to work, we can absolutely not, and I'm happy to talk more about that, discount the importance of essential human skills, of creativity, of connection, of innovation. And so I'm thrilled that at least one of the things we've discovered is that our workmates are absolutely saying our culture, our connections remain a vital part of who we are and how we work, and we want to stay focused on that.
Great, terrific, thank you. How about you, Rajamma?
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. I'm really thrilled to be this esteemed company here. In terms of what do I do in Microsoft, and I've been with Microsoft the last 8 years now, leading the HR technology area, working in the more in establishing the foundation for digital transformation, along with the experiences that we need to establish. So really a thrilling, endeavor to undertake for one of the largest tech companies that we have. And currently, for those of you who like to know the details, working on moving our ERP to the cloud with SuccessFactors. Sorry, not Workday, Greg. Interestingly, the other work that we are doing is establishing a lot of our products on the cloud, right? Working for Microsoft, most of you are using Teams, and how do you take some of the Microsoft technologies and use it for the better and the improvement of employee experience throughout the company? So some of the work that we're doing is in that area. As far as the fun fact, it is one of the things that we have discovered is that even though we are Microsoft and that we are all working online now, and we have worked online before, it's not like we haven't done remote working. We are a very Redmond-based company, so a lot of people did come to office and work together, and suddenly now we have discovered that we can't go to office and we have to all work online. We have discovered that we have to have newfound respect for how do you deal with online conversations. So, few things like you have to pause and let others speak, and certain manners that you have to develop when you're online. In the last month, I have seen quite a transformation of our workers in terms of just learning to work online, even though we are the company online. So back to you, Amy.
Terrific, thank you so much. And finally, Sergio, could you also tell us a little bit about your role, and again, the one positive thing you've discovered as a result of moving to work remotely?
Yeah, sure. My role is I'm the head of data and innovation at Nubiral, and also I am also a professor at NYU. Probably the common denominator is what is related to educate people, educate senior leaders on what we are living, what is the new normal, what is these many challenges that we were already living before COVID-19, and probably this particular situation exposed the fragility of these many companies and organizations across the world. We were already having with a hybrid culture, a hybrid world. We are living a transition from an analog culture to a new digital culture. We born analogs, we all, and we learned that we probably won't be here in 50 years, but we want our companies to be here in 50 years. So this digital transformation and this particular situation with the COVID-19 exposed those challenges, and we probably learned that we can relate to each other in a different way. We can learn that we probably won't need to travel anymore, at least for business meetings. We'll also learn that probably the future and the changes, the changes are happening exponentially. And we also learn that the future is not the continuation of the past or the present as it used to be. Now the future is very eclectic and the changes are happening at every time, and we need to be agile and we need to transform ourselves quickly and be fast.
Terrific. Thank you, Sergio.
Sure.
So to the audience, I want to invite you to join this conversation. This is a panel conversation, so there won't be any slides. There'll be a couple of questions that I will ask each of the panelists. And if you want to join in on this conversation, you can type in your questions in the chat box, and I will try to facilitate that back to the conversation that we're having. And so I'm just going to lightly, kind of go through each of our panelists and say, what's going on in the world today, and well, let's just jump in. So let me start with Greg first, which is, again, this conversation is not about COVID-19, but it's not a topic we can ignore, right? There's just too much going on in our world around this. And I wondered if you could highlight one thing, even though you're all veterans of digital transformation, working remotely and all of that, what is one thing, Greg, in your organization, in either your direct work or the company itself, that has been an impact as a result of COVID-19, even though you're already working remotely and you're already digital natives?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And it's a great question. I think one of the real opportunities and the power of having that digital infrastructure already in place is that you can turn that up and tune that up and down based on the context of what's happening in the world today. And so you cannot, to your point, ignore that. One really maybe practical example for us, and we're a fast growth company. When I joined the company 6 years ago, we had about 2,000 workmates, and we're nearly 12,000 folks now. And a really important part of our organization is our culture. We absolutely believe that happy employees lead to happy customers, and that starts the very powerful virtuous cycle. And so one of the ways that we've digitally enabled that for many years now is actually understanding our employee sentiment on an ongoing basis. So we actually survey our entire company every Friday. Every Friday is what we call Feedback Friday. And we post 2 or 3 questions, and that gives us a sense of where our workmates, how our workmates are feeling, what the employee experience is. And one of the interesting things that we knew going into moving to a completely remote workforce was that, in fact, our remote workers, according to that survey that we've been doing for more than 2 years, actually our remote workforce was having a slightly better experience than our location-based workforce. And so obviously there was no question that we would move to all remote, but we had that data and that context to know that ideally we had done a good job of helping our people leaders support remote workforce. We had a vast majority of our organization worked at least 1 or 2 days remotely just to support their lifestyle and their employee experience. And so having that data, I think, allowed us to lean in. What's been interesting now is that we're even more consistently understanding the context that our employees are in. And to the earlier comments in the last panel, that varies by all sorts of factors like country, geography, whether you've got care demands at home. And so what we're now doing is increasingly seeing the opportunity to take that data and to do what we would sort of call micro curation. How do we help really personalize content, information, context, so that's really enabling our workforce to be more successful? And so that's one example of where we took something we've been doing for many years. We really turned that up, given to the earlier comment, that things are changing on a weekly basis. And then how do we actually then use the digital platforms to automatically curate content to people in their context? So one example of where we've taken that framework and I think even applied it to address today's scenario with a greater sense of speed.
Terrific. So before I move to Rajamma on the same question, really quickly, how many employees are you polling weekly, and what software are you using in these weekly polls?
Well, of course, we use Workday. Amy, thanks for letting me share that. I didn't want to do, but what's really important there, to your point, and we get about an 88% of our workmates participate in that. We don't require it, but it gives us the data to have reliable data. But I think what's most important there is our folks feel like we are inviting them to share their experience on an ongoing basis, and they're sharing that. And so and that can go up or down based on the context. And then I'll let you go to the next question. But what's important there in a digital world is that we have the metadata associated with that. So we know what's the answer in Paris versus Pleasanton. We know the answer across generations. How are our millennials feeling versus our baby boomers, let's say? And so all of that context really becomes incredibly important in how we curate content to people, really specifically in their context.
Terrific. Thanks for asking those or answering those quick audience questions. So Rajma, can you tell us a little bit about, also impact to COVID-19? What's going on there? Give us one example of some change.
Sure. Let me just, before I answer that question, tell you what we are doing in Microsoft in terms of the polling itself. We have something called the Daily Pulse, not Friday feedback. Similar to that, we are getting information, and we are using Perceptics, which is another online platform to collect feedback. And the changes that, both our executive leaders are making decisions almost on a daily basis on how things are changing in the 110 or 111 countries we do business in, by looking at some of the pulse and some of what they are getting from the government and the local authorities on what's changing. And so decisions are made based on that. We almost weekly, if not more frequently, emails from our leaders on what the situation is and how we are responding to that. We have a common yammer, which all of our employees participate in, where we not only talk about how things are going at home, but we also talk about how we are contributing into the community, and there are beautiful stories that people can relate to during in those yammer discussions as well. And one other thing that is changing, some of the things that that Microsoft has implemented is we have now created something called a PCCL, or pandemic childcare leave for 12 weeks for all people that need that time to have time to spend with their children, because children are at home and they need to be paid attention to. So that's something new that Microsoft instituted for the employees.
Yes, thank you. I saw that in the news. I, as a parent, applause. So thank you for that. So let me turn to Sergio. Again, what's in your experience in your work, given the veteran status, what else is going on given COVID-19?
Okay, we learn a lot of things, and we're also learning that probably companies, or when you have everyone in, you can you can build pyramids, and you don't need 30 years to build something. We could accelerate business processes. We could have, even in our companies, better communication, shorter meetings, more productive ways of work, and even deploy digital transformation projects that would take months in the past. And now we have examples of companies deploying a digital transformation in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks. So that is also impressive and a huge change, because you have everyone in, and they don't have a choice, right? They need to go digital because they have their entire building empty. They cannot ask their employees to go to their offices, because if you have one employee sick, you are going to have everyone sick, and your operations would be disrupted, right? So very, very good lesson learned, that when you have everyone in, you can create miracles, right? And even deploy a digital transformation strategy in weeks, not months or years, as it used to take in the past, right? And that is also a very good news.
Yes, no, that's a great example. I can even speak for ourselves at the conference board. We have pivoted and made changes that would never have been possible, that we would have never imagined. And in the speed that we have done it in, just as you were saying, Sergio, it's really brought forth new possibilities, right? New opportunities. So yes, thank you for that. Just let me move to the next question. For those of you that are not yet fully in the digital transformation era or looking to accelerate, maybe we can ask our panelists, what has been the impact to the employee experience? So beyond COVID-19, right? Sort of what was going on before COVID-19 and certainly even after COVID-19, this digital transformation, remoteness, virtual everything, what does that mean for your employee experiences? One, and then also sort of to tack on that, some of you already hinted at some of this. Is there something new that you're experimenting with around digital and the employee experience? What are your companies looking at? And let me first turn to Rajma. If you could take that question, please, and tell us what's going on at Microsoft.
Oh, thanks, Amy, again. Lots going on in Microsoft. We all have to now reinvent a lot of things online. From every Monday, we used to have a gathering of, 700, 800 new hires that used to come to Microsoft, eagerly. And now they can't walk into that building and actually meet people in person. Now, suddenly the whole new orientation is remote. And how do we manage that? And we are trying to use our technologies and cloud to kind of figure that out. The other very interesting thing that's going to happen this summer for all of us, including me as a manager, is that all our interns, the summer interns, are going to work remotely. For summer interns, it's going to be the first time we are doing it. There's never been a case where we would actually have people. The whole summer internship is a really exciting time in Microsoft because for 12 weeks, it's like a paid holiday plus learning time for our interns. They have housing here. They get to go to parties there. I mean, I don't remember, but there have been some really cool that have played at their parties and so on. There were times that I wish I were an intern. And all of that is, and it's like people having a prom. I think that's what's going on. And I have 3 interns that are going to show up in my organization, and already I've started setting up the conversation with them, and we have a whole plan on how to manage interns through for this summer, and that's a new thing that we have to do, digital transformation, basically using a lot of our digital tools to manage that this year, different than every other year.
That's really interesting, right? And completely virtual internship program, fascinating. So how about you, Sergio? What is the impact of all of this digitization on the employee experience in your view? And what have you seen?
First, I'm seeing, as I mentioned before, a better communication. We are having daily meetings, shorter meetings. We are not meetings for an hour. We are having a check-in 15 minutes, 10 minutes with our teams, with our customers. Even the PMO meetings are shorter. We are trying to be more focused. We are also learning from our customers that being digital is something that they need to do. Digital innovation is about business innovation, and they need to innovate, they need to challenge the norms. And also probably we are living in more eclectic times that these changes are happening at the pace that never happened before. And we are investing time to innovate process, to think about what is coming next, because actually we don't know we don't even know if we are having this conversation again in 1 year now, because we are not going back to the previous situation, at least not in months, at least probably not in 2020. So we need to challenge the traditional business models. We need to probably understand that innovation, it needs to be part of our core. We are investing time to review our processes. We are investing time to probably remove the middlemen. We are investing time to make more efficient our processes, and also the go-to-market, because we have more work than ever. Now, in my case, in my company, we are probably having are almost overwhelmed. Same with my academic role. We are going full online with NYU, and this is actually a very good way to communicate with the students. We also are learning that we need to find new ways to engage students with these digital platforms, and we are finding interesting ways to improve the communications. So that is a very good opportunity for everyone, actually, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So not only, of course, hopefully better and more frequent communication, but as you and Rajamma had, it leads to innovation, right? Different ways to do
True.
things, improvement in processes or efficiencies in processes, all of which could be helpful. How about Greg? Again, how has this, being growing up in digital native impact the employee experiences, and what has that been like at Workday?
Yeah, no, I think, and then thank you. I think it's a really, really important question. And, I think our consumer experiences are really driving our corporate experiences now. And so what people expect from their consumer experiences, we need to replicate for our employees. I'll give you 3 quick examples, but before I do that, I know we're getting a number of questions regarding our Feedback Friday. Just to take 1 second on that is, we actually partner with Great Place to Work Institute. They're the folks who are the analytic engine behind Fortune's Great Places to Work. And what that does, in addition to allowing us to have thoughtfully constructed questions, is we can benchmark that against all of the other geographies in the world and the best companies in the world. And so that allows us to give us that external context. So there's a question on where we get those questions. Those happen to be the questions from Great Place to Work. We're in a partnership we have with them, and that allows us to do that global benchmarking and know where we stand. But I'll give you maybe just very quickly 3 examples. I think first is, again, this idea of micro curation, and what we call our people experience platform allows us to do that very explicitly, as I mentioned. And so we're actually curating based on your context, different information. Maybe in today's world, I might not yet have had the chance to fill out my emergency contact information within Workday. And so our workmates would only receive that as a to-do if it was contextually sensitive to them. Or there may be, our return to work program may look different in Italy as compared to, in Canada. And so we're able to really be contextually sensitive. The second thing that we see from a digital experience perspective is really understanding what your interests and aspirations are. And so one of the things that we do in curating career experiences to our folks is actually use their specific skill interests. And so our workmates are able to identify what skills they have interest in. We have something called the Talent Marketplace, which then allows other people to create gigs that can be curated to people based on machine learning algorithms that look at your current skills and your skill interests, compare it to the skills required in that gig. And so I think that's increasingly, today we primarily use it for growth and career experience growth, but I think it's going to give us the flexibility to do that, should we need to around our business. And the third thing that I would say, and we were maybe a little bit ahead of ourselves here, or ahead of the times, as part of our director program, we embraced this idea as we grew so quickly. We wanted our workmates to experience our leaders and for our leaders to share the operating principles of our company. And so we actually recorded them all on green screen. And as one of our leadership programs called Horizon, our directors in flight to our vice president roles, they actually work through a 3.5-day business simulation. And at any point during the simulation, if they have a question, they can actually put on their Oculus glasses and go into this, what we call sort of third space, which is a leadership library, and interact with our most senior leaders to understand how they would address those situations. So again, this both end. Yes, we're digitizing, and it's important to have that digitalization. And at the same time, what we want people to do is use that to build relationships, to share knowledge, to share expertise. And so I think for us, it is around the employee experience. We measure it all the time. And then we're consistently curating content, based on what we're learning from our employees. So maybe just a couple of examples, but I couldn't agree more, especially today. The experience that our employees have is going to really craft the future of our brand and how people think about whether or not they want to work with our company or work for our company in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, great examples of, like you said, curating data, right? Using the analytics to shape the experiences and using technology tools like simulations or virtual reality stuff where you can enhance the experience with the technology that you have. So terrific. Why don't we move on to the next question? You know, how can we help our organizations be more digital? Let's say we all love digital, we all think it's fabulous. You know, some of our organizations are more advanced than others. So how can we help our organizations be more digital? How do we help manage through the change, right? This is not easy for many. And, you know, going on Zoom has been, I'm sure, a fun thing for many, right? Including some of your family members that perhaps really, you know, found it a little bit harder. Even things like that. You know, how do you know when an organization is ready for the change? And Sergio, maybe I'll start with you first. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
First, we are living a particular situation that was, again, exposed or is happening exponentially now with this pandemic COVID-19 thing. But we were already having challenges with companies going through challenging traditional processes, and probably having companies not seeing the same picture. That is the biggest challenge, right? We have companies even before COVID-19 with a very siloed traditional processes, with people not talking to each other, not having everyone seeing the same picture, not having all the data in one place, not having analytics to see the information, not having the chance to connect the dots. Even if you walk New York, again, before COVID-19, you see many empty spaces for rent. Those traditional retail spaces are already out of business because they were already disrupted from by Amazon, by these many different companies that are already digital, right? Because we are competing now with companies that born digital and that are probably winning the marketplace, and that is a good sign that we need to go digital, right? And if we talk about change management, if we talk about how we can address or approach a digital transformation strategy, communication is the best way. Having everyone in, having something that is not relying on IT departments, not relying on consultants, but instead having a strategy across the company to approach this thing that is happening, right? So collecting the data, having a data culture, having analytics to see the same picture, automated processes, and also, of course, predicting the future. Once we have the data, we can predict what is coming next, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I just quick comments. Some of you are writing in the chat that, you know, you're struggling, your organizations are struggling with this change, and, you know, your leadership might have been very traditional, very hesitant, or very reluctant, all of the above. And so that continues to be a problem for many organizations. What about Rajamma? What are your thoughts on that? How do we help our organizations through the change and become more digital?
Yeah, you know, prior to this COVID, I think the answer would be different. Now the answer is we have almost been thrust upon it, right? There are some, we almost have, the digital transformation has been pushed on us instead of us pushing on a digital transformation is what I'm trying to say. Just to, you know, people who love data, the Microsoft team users last year around this time was about 20 million. Same time this year, it's about 44 and just growing by leaps and bounds daily. I had to shut off my video right now because in my hood, the local school district just started online classes, and our and our broadbands are taking a dive right now because all the little ones are taking on classes, and you know, if I talk with my video on, it's getting lags and it's getting disrupted. So you know, yay, digital transformation, but more to broadband at this point. But on the other hand, what I'm trying to say is that things that we were hesitating and thinking about earlier on is something that we almost have no choice right now in certain ways. But I think this will. I think some of the attendees had questions about hesitancy about moving forward with teleworking and all of that. This has changed. What 10 years ago, what we thought was not possible is now a possible. The whole world is shut down and people are working from home, especially when they can. I mean, not every service can be worked from home. So then the companies will have no choice but to make those moves at this point to digital, go to the cloud. All are possible now, and these possibilities, these opportunities have to be used with utmost caution, but also with utmost zeal in order to move us, propel us forward. This last time something like this would happen. It's a global community now, and with global community, global, you know, we pass more than just love amongst us when it to having a global community, and which means that we have to be ready for a lot of these kinds of things in the future. And if that is the case, then how do we sustain ourselves is what we need to think about. And digital transformation will take you there. I think Sergio has already talked through the fact that we look at our data, we look at the analytics, and we use that to drive our digital transformation. And that's exactly how Microsoft doing it. We are also in the process of doing that in a lot of ways in our internal systems and so on. Yes, we use a lot of Microsoft technologies and other third-party technologies to do it. And I would say that the other companies do the same, which is to look inwards and then look outside and see what's going on in the world and what else, how is the environment forcing you to kind of make some different choices as we move further in the economic, in the geo-economic world right now.
Great. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a struggle for everyone, right? This was completely unexpected. And as Rajamma has said, we're thrown into it. We are no longer even have a choice for many of us. Greg, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, and it's again a great question, and obviously a remarkable time. You know, I think to your point on thinking about the change management, I personally do think, I think it's really important to think about how we frame some of these topics, how we think about it, especially, I know, again, I've been watching the chat and folks talking about maybe senior leaders who are, you know, not so focused on remote work. At least I think, listening to The Economist earlier in the program and the great speakers you've had, you know, agility and the ability to be flexible, you know, we always knew that was going to be important, and my gosh, how important it is today. So I just think as we think about, rather than framing it as telework or remote work, rather than framing some of these things as, you know, certain things, what we need to do is look at the, you know, not to let the sort of technology tail wag the business dog, if you will, and say, how do we focus on employee experience, which will be central? What are the things that we do in order to do that? How do we maintain agility? And so I would just offer to folks is, rather than focused on the solutions particularly, how do we, when engaging our business, say what's really important right now? I think it's agility. What allows us to do that? I think it's employee experience and the commitment of our workforce and their productivity. What do we need to do that? And so I would just offer, I know again, there's been quite a bit of focus on the solutions, but I do think the opportunity for all of us now is to really be focused on what are the business imperatives, and how does this new technology, how does digitalization just help us close that digital divide and be much better positioned for agility and employee experience as we move forward.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And thinking about, like you said, Greg, the digital imperative, the agility of all of our organizations, and which means agility for the people as well, right? That our employees have to be agile. And when you think about the earlier conversation, the earlier session, we have 5 generations in our workplace moving ahead, and everything from the very young to the more experienced folks. And digitization has different impact to different populations, different skill sets, different mindsets. I wouldn't even call it an age thing, right? It's not an age thing. It could be capabilities, it could be access, it could be skills, it could be mindset, acceptance, non-acceptance. All of that speaks to the greater need for the agility in our workforce, in the folks that we have. How do we help everyone, regardless of age or generation or population, see, the benefits of the digital world to their world, right? And if we can help them guide that along, we may have more equalization, right, in our world and in our population.
Well, I think your point, what's one of the things that's been really interesting is this whole idea of, to your point, multiple generations. I mean, we're lucky enough to have all our parents still living, and we've got 2 university-age daughters at home. And, their Zoom skills, their FaceTime skills, they have, just because they want to be connected, they want to see. And so, the opportunity to leverage this immediacy to enable people to stay connected, I think, actually, ironically, is a great opportunity. And I think, to your point, it doesn't know age bounds. It's really, people want to feel that sense of connection right now, and that is so important. And this technology is enabling that to happen.
Yep. And before we move on to our last question, in the interest of time, I completely agree with that, Greg. Just as a personal note, we did a group video chat with my 84-year-old mom, because somebody in the family had a birthday, and we did the group chat. And let me tell you, that was an adventure, getting everybody, especially her, onto a group chat and a full video. But it was fun. We did it. We all sang happy birthday, and that need to connect that Greg was just mentioning, I think is so important in driving so many of us in doing the work that we do. Okay, just because we have a couple of quick minutes left, I want to ask the last question to our panel, and really just a quick advice, which is sort of one key lessons learned, right? You're all veterans, you've been doing this for a while. One key lessons learned that you can impart on our audience as to, what you would recommend for those that are transitioning and or looking to accelerate. Let me start with you, Greg.
Yeah, I'll offer the one. I could have a long list, but I'll offer the one. And I think that goes back to where I started, which is this idea of social agility. I have often shared with others that I didn't think this focus, that this digital divide would happen overnight, but it would happen over time. And as my wife constantly reminds me, I was wrong once again. This, in fact, did happen overnight. And so I know we're focused appropriately on how we connect people digitally, but I do think what's equally important, and the next wave of what's going to be important, is this idea of social agility and how we help people maintain their creativity, maintain their connections, and how we think about that both individually and as organizations is going to be the next, ironically, digital imperative, even though it's going to be around essential human skills.
Yeah. How about you, Rajamma?
I think Greg has said it better than I would. It's all about the human spirit at this point, and how do we keep connecting, using that as a platform, not cloud or digital as a platform, to ensure that you use that and you harvest that to make sure that we have solutions that will sustain it. There were some questions on the panel, on the chat window, that I thought were interesting about, hey, these are hard times. How do we say that we go implement something new digital while we are trying to keep the company up? The advice to them would be that to keep the company up, you've got to go digital in a lot of ways right now. So you need to be able to balance the cost versus the training of the company, and you will find some answers to work of that data. And you don't have to spend a lot of money sometimes to get some of the some tools or solutions that you can deploy in your organization, each other, to share documents, or to do some of that. I do know that many companies, including Microsoft, have offered free software during these trying times for at least for the next 6 months or so. So try and look those up for any use that you might have, depending upon your organization, how you can leverage some of that as you go forward. These are trying times for everybody, and I know that it's ready to share, and so you can take some advantage of it right now.
Thank you. Thank you. And last thought, Sergio, please.
I would say there are no magic wands, right? Digital is the new normal, and these changes and this particular situation and any resilience that we want to experiment needs to think and do things differently, right? We need to invest time, sometimes through the question that someone asked in the chat box about getting used to these new models. We need to invest some time, personal time. We need to get used to this. There are not magic wands, again. There are not a plug and play model that the company could implement or can implement overnight. Everything needs time, everything needs personal time, investment, and everything needs collaboration, right?
Yeah, no, terrific. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, just in the interest of time, I'm going to close it up. I want to first thank our panelists, Rajamma, Greg, Sergio, really insightful thoughts. Thank you for helping as veterans, helping the rest of us along in this journey. We're all learning together, so thank you for that. I hope that all of you gain some thinking thoughts. That's all we can hope for, pondering thoughts, right? Social agility, fragility, and resilience. It's about the people experience. It's about the human spirit, right? I love the thread of analytics through the whole conversation. How do we use data actually to support the human spirit, to become more human? Digitization actually requires us to be more human. And I'll leave that thought with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Stella, for having us. Thank you to the panelists. Really great conversation. And I hope you all enjoy the next session.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Amy, and thank you, panelists, for such a great and insightful conversation.